What? No.
Oh, but she's on board this because she doesn't even know. Yeah, we've been reading. They're going to try to get some emails. There's several people that are not sending emails and calls that just would not let her to know when they do come on the good things. I need one that I'm working with this day before we come up.
I mean, the company's thinking of that, and then we have a clicker on it, but this one actually works a lot better. So, written in that.
Welcome, everyone, to tonight's Planning Commission meeting. We have 4 items on the agenda. There are public hearings tied to 3 of the 4. We'll go ahead and start with Commissioners Ellsworth and Howard offering the prayer and to lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance.
Our dear kind Father in heaven, we are very grateful for this day and for this city and the opportunity that we have to serve on behalf of many people who live in Provo. We pray that will help us to make good decisions and that the outcomes will be positive for all of Provo, and bless us all that we can have an educational and civil discourse. And we say this in the name of Jesus Christ. Amen.
Amen.
Please join me in our pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you.
Thank you. We'll go ahead and start with a roll call. We'll start with you, Commissioner Howard.
Andrew Howard, no conflicts.
Shannon Ellsworth, no conflict.
Dave Anderson, no conflict.
Edward Jones, no conflict.
Brian Smith, no conflicts.
Once again, thank you. For the first 3 items are all very closely connected, so I'm going to read those 3 in together. Then we'll have staff present on the 3 at once, and we'll then turn things over to the applicant and just kind of proceed accordingly. The first item number 1, is a proposed general plan amendment for property located at 490 South State Street. The second item is a proposed zone change for roughly the same property. And item number 3 is a project plan approval request for an apartment complex, again located at 490 South Main Street. So with that, we'll turn things over to staff.
All right, thank you. So here outlined is the properties that are being proposed for these 3 items. State Street, 500 South, and then there's 700 East there. This property It's currently in our general plan it's 2 lots. The southern portion those aren't showing up, I apologize. So there's 2 lots, like I mentioned. The southern portion of the lot here is in the general plan as commercial, and the northern lot where the home is a residential designation. They're requesting to change the southern lot to match, to be residential as well. And then the the zoning on the property, both properties are currently in our general commercial zone. The request there to rezone is to our high-density residential zone, or HDR zone, is being requested for that. Here's the project plan that's being proposed. The gray areas are showing the 2 structures that would be built. They're each currently shown as 4 stories with 32 units in each, so 64 units with the parking. So staff reviewed the proposed project plan as though the zoning were in place for the HDR, and that the project would meet that if it were zoned or rezoned to HDR.
Would you talk about the surrounding uses at some point?
Yeah, so around the property, along State Street here to the north of the proposed development, these properties are zoned commercial. Over here is where it gets into residential zone. This parcel immediately to the west is zoned commercial, but then from here over it's residential. To the south of the project, this is all residential, I believe, as well. And then across the street is other zoning where there's some higher density type developments over there. Here's some renderings that show what the proposed project would look like. So I can just kind of go through those. And a representative for the applicant is here that can discuss any of the architecture, things like that, if you have questions there. The neighborhood had a neighborhood meeting to discuss the project. Concerns were brought up about the adjacency to these residential homes, with the project being 4 stories, being very tall for that side of State Street. There were concerns brought up about access coming in from 500 South as opposed to coming in from State Street. Concerns about the type of traffic that would be generated from this project coming into that residential neighborhood there along 500 South. So those are some of the concerns that were brought up at the neighborhood meeting, and also made known to staff during this project. So if you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer those.
Any questions from the commission? I guess I have just one, maybe a couple actually, relative to, well, now I wonder if I'm getting a little bit ahead of myself. Do you want to talk a little about zoning now, or do you want to answer a question just relative to zoning districts, or?
Yeah, you can ask a question.
Okay. HDR is what the applicants have proposed that would accommodate the density that they're looking at for the development. Just in terms of other options, MDR, for example, if the property were zoned MDR instead of HDR, what kind of an impact might that have on the design, height, for example?
Mm-hmm. So the MDR zone is the medium density residential zone. So I'll kind of tell what both zones have. The HDR, the high density, allows up to 50 units per acre, whereas the medium density zone allows for up to 30. This project is at 34 units per acre, so it'd be just over what the medium density zone allows. The height limits in the HDR is 55 feet high. In the MDR, it's 45 feet high. This four-story project is at 44 feet, so it would fit in either one. I think the biggest difference is the units. There are 4 units over to be able to get into the MDR zone, and the setbacks change. In the MDR zone, instead of being 10-foot maximum setbacks, they're 20-foot minimum setbacks for like the front yard and the street side yard. So if you can see along State Street, those buildings are brought up close to State Street. If it were in the MDR zone, they'd be back 20 feet and then, closer into the neighborhood, which would, bring that height that's been a concern from the neighbors closer to those homes. So I think that's one of the benefits about keeping the HDRs, that it keeps the building further away from that areas along State Street at least. The side yard setbacks of the building on the north, it would be still the MDR, HDR would still be able to have it that close to the property, adjacent property to the north in either zone. And then they both have the same rear yard setback of 20 feet.
Thank you. Maybe just one other one, and I wouldn't be surprised if you don't know this off the top of your head, but the structures across the street on the east side of State Street, are those 3 stories, 4 stories?
I believe some of them are 3 stories, but if you look at them, they're kind of set down a bit. So the first story is about a half story below grade. So they appear to be 2.5 stories at grade instead of 3.
Is this unit directly to the west, is that a home or is that a commercial structure?
I believe that's a commercial structure there. It was designed to somewhat look like a home, but it's more of a commercial looking structure, and it's a commercial use. It's zoned commercial. It's not till you get to the property to the west of that where it is actual a residential zone and residential use.
Gotcha. Do we know anything about that commercial structure, like its lifespan or intent?
I don't. I know the neighbors that live right next to it are here, and they might be able to provide some more information for you.
Thanks.
We'll go to Google Street View, and so you'll be able to see that building in just a minute.
While we get there, any other questions from the commission? We'll go ahead and invite the applicant up while we kind of get queued up here, maybe just take a peek at the street view.
My name is Troy Sanders. I'm filling in for Tim Silver on the agenda. He wasn't able to make it here this evening. My address is 5151 South, 900 East in Salt Lake City with Think Architecture.
Doesn't sound like it's off, it looks like it is. Doesn't sound like it's on, though.
Can you hear me?
Speak right into that, please.
Okay. Is that better? Okay. While we're waiting for the Google Earth Street View, are there any specific questions that I can answer? I've got some images, some of which Dustin showed. I can talk about any of the other specifics about the project while we're waiting for that.
The project is designed mainly for married housing, is that correct?
That's correct. 1 and 2 bedroom units.
It's always seemed to me that the buildings on the east side there were taller than they clearly are here, so.
Those ones right there, the 3-story.
Right.
Can you pull up here?
Those are 3-story buildings with a pitched roof, and our proposal is 4 stories with a flat roof. So essentially, the height is about the same.
Can you tell us a little bit about the market study that you've done, what you think they'll go for, who will buy those?
They will be for rent, marketed to students, married student housing, newlyweds, primarily married students with one or two kids. That's the primary market target.
And have you been working with BYU Housing? Do they have to approve a development like this?
I am not familiar with that. Again, I'm substituting tonight, but it's my understanding that married student housing does not fall under the same category as single student housing.
Okay. Gotcha. So it may be just anyone, right? It may not be a married person. It may not be a student. Is that right?
It would be marketed to the public. They can't turn anyone down as long as they meet the criteria. But the market target is for married student housing.
Okay. Thank you.
Any other questions for the applicant? I guess I'll dive in then. Just relative to some of the concerns that have been raised by the residents, the neighbors, that is. It seems like there's one really significant one, being the height of the building being 4 stories instead of 3.
Mm-hmm.
Access also seems to be a concern. Can you speak to the prospect of potentially being able to make the project work with 3 stories?
It makes the project much more difficult. The owners of the project want to pursue a 4-story project because as we laid this out, we anticipated what some of the concerns would be, which is why we pushed the buildings along State Street to create a nice facade along State Street. We were concerned about the neighborhood on 5th South. We pushed the building as far as we could to the north. We know there are existing residences now. That is a commercial zone. I don't know what the future prospects of that are, but we've tried to take that into consideration. As far as the traffic goes, we've worked with staff. We explored the option of coming onto State Street. It's not recommended by the traffic report. Staff did not want to go that route, and the state prohibits. They don't prohibit, but they are trying to reduce the number of accesses off of the highway. So based on those recommendations, we've put both entrances into the parking lot off of 5th South. The traffic report was performed. They looked at the 2 intersections near the project, the one at State Street and 5th South, the other at 7th West and 5th South. The 7th East stated a level of service A. The access onto State Street went from a level of service A to a level of service B. I think it's important to note that a level of service B is still considered a very free-flowing traffic movement. They are ranked from A to F, and F is when you're stopped at the light for 20 minutes trying to get through. So a B, the standard flow of traffic is about 16 car lengths apart. So there is still significant movement through the intersection. And again, those are at the peak times in the morning and again in the evening during the rush hour times.
Mr. Anderson.
Thank you.
Early in the planning process of this, it was debated on whether or not this building in the back should be placed out here on this street. If you look at recent projects around Provo, in recent years, we've had the buildings come out to the street. In this case, we thought that it would be better to put this building in the back because a building out here would create more impact, whether it's 3 stories or 4 stories, would certainly have more impact on this residential area where that's zoned commercial and anticipated someday to be commercial uses. And also we have found that as we bring buildings out to the road frontage, even if there's adequate parking on site, there's a fair number of people who just want to park along the street and run into the building because it tends to be more convenient. So we were afraid that by bringing a building out here, it would encourage that parking on the street. We think the buildings here on State Street are very important because there are State Street design guidelines that talk about bringing buildings out the street, not having parking between the street and the building. So we think that is important for the design guidelines of State Street, but we thought that certainly would be better for the neighborhood than something out here. Their parking does exceed the code requirements, if I remember correctly.
Even with a four-story structure?
Yes.
Any other questions for the applicant?
What is the ratio between off-street parking and the number of units?
We are only counting the number of spaces inside the parking area. There is, along Fifth South, there's kind of a inlet or a turn-in on the curbing where there is parking along there, but that is not included in any of our counts.
So what is the ratio? What is the count?
The total count per your code requires 120 spaces, and that's where we're at.
Oh, okay.
I will mention as well, in discussions with the staff, they wanted to realign the access from Fifth South onto State Street. So that will be done by the city. The applicant is dedicating the land to be able to make that turn so that the road comes in at a 90-degree angle into State Street.
Once again, thank you. Any other questions?
On your traffic study, was there any conclusion made as to how difficult it would be to make a left turn onto State Street?
They take that into account, and that's taken into the rating as far as a level of service. Obviously, during busy times of the morning and afternoon commute, that's going to be more difficult just because of the background amount of traffic. But at other times of the day, it becomes much easier. But again, it's a level of service B, which is still considered a very free-flowing traffic movement.
So if a resident wanted to have the protection of getting onto State Street or 400 South? Yeah, 400 South, what route would he take?
Are you talking about 400 South or 500 South?
400 South to the north.
To the north. How does he get onto State Street if he wants the protection of a traffic light?
So are you talking about how would someone from this project get up to 400 South?
Yes.
I think it would depend on the time of day. Busy times of the day, they may go to the west and take a route to the north to hit a traffic light. At other times of the day, they would make the easier turn onto State Street.
Not to belabor the point, but just to be specific, how would a resident get to BYU if that resident didn't want to, or if that resident wanted the protection of a traffic light?
They would most likely go to the west.
Okay.
As part of this, there are two turn lanes as part of this realignment of Fifth South, one to go to the north and one to go to the south on to State Street.
Mm-hmm.
Just a note, I travel that road all the time trying to get to the northeast side of Provo, probably 3 times a week. And I take Fifth and I turn right to get on to hit the light and then get on, what's that avenue that hooks up with 9th East? Is it 9th East that curls around? Yeah, 9th East. Yeah, so that makes it very, very easy for me to do. The lights are more favorable going all the way on 9th East than hitting that one up by the Maverick. You might sit there for 3 minutes.
Anything else for the applicant?
I'm not sure I have it for the and I'm waiting for kind of hear the full story.
Okay.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Saunders, thank you. Is the neighborhood chair here with us tonight? Would you like to take a few minutes to?
Hi. To be right next to it. I think the most, my name's Kira McClellan. I'm the neighborhood chair for Mazer Neighborhood. Some of our really big concerns have been addressed. One issue is the parking, because already there, it's really kind of a nightmare because the apartment complex is across the street. They end up coming and parking all along 500 South as well. And so I know that they have like one parking spot at least per unit, but in all actuality, once people are married, they usually have two cars that they bring to the marriage, not one, especially if children are involved. So I know that that's going to be a huge issue. And then also the height. I know a lot of the neighbors are really concerned about how high it is, and a lot of them really enjoy looking at the mountains out their windows, and this will pretty much prevent that completely from being able to see those mountains that everybody enjoys so much. So I know those are some of the really big concerns I think that residents have.
Any questions for?
Yeah, I do, and I appreciate what you said about the view being blocked, because clearly that'll happen, whether it's 3 or 4. And maybe the staff can answer this, because, I'm not sure I understand the transition issue between a 3-story and a 4 as far as that's concerned, because, my aunt had a big store put up in front of her view, and it didn't matter at that point. Do you have any opinions about that?
As far as the 3 compared to 4 stories? Is that
Yeah,
you're
what
saying?
difference does it make to you in your neighborhood, other than the traffic? We know that's important.
Right. Well, I think just that because like all around it is just houses, there really isn't anything super tall on that side of State Street. So I think all of a sudden it'll be just like this huge jutting out property that doesn't match anything else along that State Street on that side.
It very well might be, but it looks like a very nice design as far as I
Yeah,
can
yeah,
tell.
it does. It looks really nice, I think. I agree.
Are there any, if it's married couple, and you probably have apartment complexes down in that neighborhood with married couples, has the experience been generally good? And I guess a question for the developer is, will there be an on-site management to that complex?
One issue we have in a lot of our neighborhood, just not just this area, but in all of Mazer, is that we actually have a large amount of 1 and 2 bedrooms already in the area. And as soon as families have 1 or 2 kids, they are kind of forced out because there's nothing that can hold them anymore.
For a crib, not a place for a crib.
So, I don't know. I mean, obviously they want to do what's best for them, but I feel like there's already so many of that in our area of 1 and 2 bedrooms, and so it's not really filling the niche of trying to keep families in this downtown area and trying to have them stay and grow. They kind of got to go because there's not enough houses out there for them. So,
Thank you.
Any other questions for the chair? Thank you. We'll go ahead and open it up for anyone else that would like to offer comments.
Need to open it to neighborhood chairs first.
She was the neighborhood chair. Sorry, for any other neighborhood chairs here tonight? Thank you. Okay, not seeing any that maybe want to address this item. We'll go ahead and just open it up to anybody else that would like to address the commission.
Hello, my name is Donald Danner. We live on 4th South, 734 East, and we're right up next to that red line. The thing that troubles us is the loss of privacy that we feel in a family neighborhood. Married students, I suppose, is fine, but we sort of feel like there are going to be a lot of eyes peering into our backyard. We're also concerned about the problems that come along with high-density housing. where you just stack them deep. And we're worried about that, those sorts of issues. So anyway, we're right up against that red line. We're just, one of those homes that happens to be right there. And we're thinking, holy smokes, we never counted on this when we moved into this little residential neighborhood that we really love, our family kind of atmosphere and the folks that live around us. And we're not quite sure what's going to happen with such a transient kind of building and structure. So we would support, we feel a lot more comfortable if it was at most 3 stories, but preferably a 2-story building or some townhomes. We'd be fine with that. But anyway, I'm not sure what the grandkids will think when they're out swimming, when they see all the windows there in this tall building, so we'd rather avoid that. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Christy Danner, Donald Danner's wife. I wanted to clear some things up. All the apartments on the other side of State Street, they are 3 stories, but at least one of those stories is halfway underground. That's a big difference. I don't care if it's got a pitched roof or a flat roof. They may be pitched, but there's still a half a story underground. That's not going to happen with the 4 stories. And everybody in that neighborhood is going to feel like we're in a fishbowl. And when we brought these concerns up at the summer meeting, we were basically told, tough, live with it. So I think that's where a lot of our hostility is coming, is they don't want to hear anything. They want to make their money and walk away and leave us with the mess. We've already got a lot of drug issues over there behind Maverick in those apartments. It's starting to creep into the other ones. Maybe this would help clean it up, but I don't know how. We have our wards, for those of you who are members. It's already so transit. We lose over 60% of our ward every 6 months and have to restart. Again, not a city problem, but it's already hard for neighborhoods doing this and stakes to, so I can't see. Though I've known a lot, I know a lot of the neighbors in that area. I've talked with a lot can't be here because of health issues and different things. And a lot of us are in agreement. Townhomes, 2-story if it's all on the same ground, 3 if you go partly under. And that would keep it aligned with everything else. I do worry about my grandchildren that want to play in the backyards, and who's going to be looking over them? And I own another house on that street, so that my daughter and her kids live in. So think about that for a second. How would you feel if people moved into these apartments into your neighborhood and could sit and stare down at your grandkids? It's kind of a creepy feeling. And as a grandma, I'm very emotional about that. So that's what I have to say about it.
Can I ask you a question and maybe throw this out there for anybody else that wants to just comment on it? One option is to potentially limit the height of the buildings from what's being proposed tonight. And with that might result in the applicant needing to provide a greater setback to move the buildings farther away from State Street and the property line to the north than what they're shown as here. Is that a trade-off in your mind that's worth
like
discussing?
I said, my garage is that little gray building right next to that.
Is that it?
I don't think you can get any, no, we're the one right there. That's my garage, and my house is behind that little tree. We can't get any closer. I mean, I don't know how you'd get any closer, to be honest. I'll be able to throw a pebble over my garage and probably hit the building.
In one respect, the way that it's designed now does place the buildings.
It's not going to affect me other than they could look over because my garage is about a story and a half, 2-story, so they can still look over. But the neighbors right next to me, they're little girls. Their yard goes clear back. Mm-hmm. So and you have to understand, every house on this street, anybody in the corner lots will be able to see in. is 2-story max, and every one of them is halfway underground, one of the stories. So you're going to be 3 stories over us, almost. There's not anything over there in that neighborhood that is above 1.5 stories, above ground. Nothing until you cross the street. This will be the tallest building on this side of almost up until Center Street, until you hit 9th and Center. That's how big it is. Not something I like.
Thank you.
Ed Brown, I live at 608 East, 500 South. The way you got this put up here for parking is not the way to do it for 5th South. And the through streets there on 7th East, that little through street is probably not 45 feet wide. It's too narrow for a fire truck to get down just about with all the cars that's parked on the streets. 5th South is getting just as bad as 7th East. You can't find a place to park in front of your house anymore. I've been there 68 years and it's a mess. I can't see, have any of you people been down there to look? All of you?
I looked at it today.
Okay, just today?
I'm from Provo, sir, so I drive past it.
Well,
I got refamiliar today just to try to do some due diligence.
and the height that they're presenting to us, we could live with a 2-story building, but 4 stories, that's ridiculous. Most of these homes down in there.
Is it the traffic
between
that,
80 and 100 years old.
is it the traffic that's the concern about the 4 stories?
Traffic is twice as bad as it used to be. Mm-hmm. We have Tip Mental Health down there, but we have all them patients go there. We have that place you was wondering what they do in there, they build gavels for the judge.
Is it a big business? Lots of gavels.
How you found it.
We need more judges?
In my opinion, Mr. Stratton has let that piece of property go to pot for years and years and years. When I grew up, there was a 24-hour cafe on that corner. Some of you may remember it, and some of you may not. But I know a lot of the neighbors, they wonder why, and I wonder why, but this is plain ridiculous to put a 4-story building in a residential area. That little building there you guys wondered about, that was put there as a commercial because he couldn't build it there. You want to rezone it? That's not the way to do it. Why didn't you rezone the whole thing before? So, it's not right. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, my name's Lola Adams Hutchings. I own the home where the truck and trailer is out in front of it right now. I've been there since 1971, August of 1971, when we had dirt and a little bit of asphalt right in the middle. We put up across the street, it's absolutely ridiculous what we have over because they don't have the parking. So what's going to happen? Thank God my kids are raised. I don't have to worry about that. But I've lived there for years, and little road right down the middle. And now these apartments off to this side over here, they're parking in front of our places because they don't have parking. They park there, they park on that side of 5th South, and it's absolutely ridiculous. There's times we can't even get out of our driveways. So I feel bad for them, and I wouldn't mind some, but that's a lot of apartments and a lot of people. And like I said, I've raised 4 kids there. I'm having a fit. Maybe I'm going to have to move, but thank you.
Thank you. Would anyone else like to comment on this project? You better come up now.
Hi, I'm Tess Nelson. I live at 754 East, 500 South. So I like the way that they've opened it up, but just in the last month and a half, I've seen 2 to 3 different accidents with people turning left. So I feel like traffic's already a pretty big issue, and then to add that many more cars per day will probably not help that out. I have 3 small children, and I like to let them ride their bikes up and down the sidewalks. So I think that the increased traffic will make that difficult. But thank you.
Anyone else?
My name is Yvonne Oteo. I live on 673 East 500 South. I actually worry about the amount of cars coming because they already speed down that street. Students who are getting across or coming to those apartments that are across, or there's just so much speed going on. And we've got small children. We've got a lot of small children on that street. Having an increased number of vehicles trying to get to work, leaving, being late, whatever it is, that would cause a higher danger for our children, I think. The number of people there would be really difficult to have. I agree with that. So,
Thank you. Anyone else?
My name's Sharon Memmott, and I'm up in Edgemont, but I drive this area occasionally. My concern would be he's asking for HDR in item 2 for the sole purpose that he can get closer to the street, and living up near Edgemont and driving the area of 9th East and 700 North with that building that ended up right on the street. I think we need to keep in mind that at some point, someday, we may want to widen this area. I know it was just approved, but we may need that space if we get mass transit or something coming down here. Also, you have single-family homes immediately right up next to this. I think we need to keep the transition zones as we increase our population. And so maybe a medium density, I know that's not what he's asking for, but maybe a medium density would be a better consideration here, which would also bring down the number of parking units, parking spaces that he's allowed, and parking spaces that are needed per unit, which would maybe give more parking, because it sounds like the neighbors feel like there's already too many cars, and reality is here in Provo, what's in code isn't necessarily what we really need for each unit, because occasionally you want to have a visitor come, and that's not what's allowed in code. So,
Thank you.
My name is Ben Free, and I live at 730 East, 150 South, which is further to the north of where we're at. But I do periodically visit a business or two down that way, plus I have friends and neighbors that I know down that way as well. My concern, again, is the traffic because of the high-rise or high-density housing across the way. They're along the sides of the street. Yeah, they've got this where the cemetery is further south, they've got that so you can't park on State Street. But getting across the street, making a left-hand turn, I feel is extremely dangerous. I'm also concerned about some security issues there where we, with the modifications to 300 South, where limited access to 4th is getting over to that side or State Street. I usually go down 9th and wait for the light to get on State Street. I work at the Public Works Building. And in the morning, even trying to just turn left on that at the 8 o'clock hour, sometimes you have to wait 5 minutes before you can make a left-hand turn from traffic coming up Springville. Going home, you'd have to wait sure you're clear before you can get on. I'm just concerned about the extra traffic. I'm also concerned if you're going 4 stories high, that not only would it, be like voyeurism to the people who are right behind that place in their houses, but also that They would not be able to see the mountains, which is a very stable part of what we have. I know that in the area that I have, it was originally designed as a walking area. I've been familiar with the area all my married life, which is 42 years, simply because we bought my wife's grandfather's house and chose to live there. We do not have enough parking on our streets. We have some places that have driveways, some don't. We have the little alleyways. Typically, they're all congested, and I don't even think a fire truck could get down our streets where we are at present, and I visualize the same thing happening there should those extra cars come. So I'm just voicing concerns here and just letting you know that I feel there's some safety issues going on. I don't know if a traffic light just makes their traffic worse, but you know, something's going to have to be done for that turning left to get back up that way, or else you have to drive around. So thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, Martha Rasmussen. I'm the first residential to the west. All of these are good points. We are concerned about the traffic and the parking. Even if that solution was solved, however, having a 4-story building in the middle of a 1-story neighborhood, predominantly 1-story neighborhood, is, no matter how pretty the design is, and it is, it's going to stick out like a sore thumb. There will be no visual harmony. It will not look like part of the neighborhood. It is going to be, it is not going to blend nicely with what we already have. And people are going to notice, we're going to notice. And yes, so visually that is a point. And if they really want to do family housing, they should do family housing properly so that we can have people stay in the neighborhood instead of leave every 6 months. Thank you.
Thank you.
My name is Daniel Aparicio. I live in 461 South, 600 East. For the issues that has been mentioned about the traffic, when we are looking for a house, we try to find a place for our family and where they can be safe. It is my personal opinion that the traffic and the problems that this project is bringing to the neighborhood is going to cause less desirability for our houses if we decide to sell them. And also, it is my opinion that there's going to be an impact, a financial impact in the prices of the houses. Thank you.
Thank you. This is it. Anybody else?
Tad Rasmussen, live at 701 East 500 South. I was wondering when the traffic study was done, if it was done when school was in or school was out, because there's a big difference in the traffic flow at the time. And also, someone asked the question, yes, there's a lot of apartments south of us, and they're 3-bedroom, 1 bath, some 2-bed. And people move in there, they stay a while, they stay a few years, finish school, they have the kids, it gives them a place to stay. And it helps build unity in the neighborhood, and that's what we're hoping would go in this area. Something like that would blend in and help families feel like they belong part of Provo and want to stay here and make it even better.
Thank you. I thought I saw somebody else. Anybody else? Anyone else? If not, then we will close the hearing and invite the applicant up to address any of the comments that were shared.
Are there specific comments that you'd like me to address?
I would like to know if you are going to have on-site management to this complex.
On-call management. There's not an office on site.
Thank you.
Question was raised about the traffic study and when that was performed.
I don't have a specific date. I believe it was done this fall. That's my recollection, but I've been a peripheral player in this.
Was there any study made by the architectural firm as to the sight lines to the mountains with the 4-story height?
I actually looked at that today, knowing that that's a concern. Maybe if you could bring up some of the images, I have them in my PowerPoint, and I think you may have had them in some of yours. Trees themselves grow to usually a height of 40 to 50 feet, depending on the species. There are a couple, maybe if you could just advance it a couple, there are some street level views that we did. Keep going. There's one along 5th South. And I think that maybe the next one. Oh, that's perfect. These were some images that we were asked to put together by staff. These were some photos that they asked us to superimpose the actual 3-dimensional model so that they could get a feel for the height of the buildings. You can see that the trees, even some of the smaller trees, are 20, 30 feet tall. And really, the sight line is about the same from a standing person at the west property line. So as you look down 5th South to the east, you can see that it does cut off a little bit of the bottom of the mountain, but you still have the view above. And the farther west or farther away you get from the buildings, the more of the mountain you see.
So it is your position that the trees are already blocking the view, and the buildings would not have an impact?
You will still see the buildings. I'm not implying that you won't ever see them.
Okay.
But we have a substantial planting area along the street in the parking lot. And so those trees themselves, as they mature, will be almost the same height or, within a reasonable height of the buildings themselves. So just standard trees will be about that same height if we're concerned about blocking views. Now, granted, that is a summer issue when you've got leaves on the trees, but just to give you a perspective of how tall the buildings are, I think that image in the lower left kind of gives you a feel for what you see of the mountains beyond.
Thank you.
Do you have one? I always have a question. Where's the dumpster?
Let me go to the planting plan because this is the most current one. It's back here in the corner where the dump trucks will come back, take the dumpster, and then go out.
Reasonable hours and things like that, so it's not messing with the neighbors. Yeah. Okay. And then what about parking? What are your thoughts on parking? That's been an issue that we've run into a few projects where, what's allowed is kind of a perfect world, and everybody brings 1.5 cars. What's reality is things leak over, as we can see is going on across the street toward the east. What are your thoughts there as far as, where do they go from there?
Our parking ratio is just under 2 per unit. I don't know the exact number. It's 120. Right. So about 1.88 spaces per unit. And that's the standard that is in the zoning ordinance.
Okay. Yeah, one last thing. The change from HDR to MDR to really does away with 4 units. Is that right?
4 units per acre, so it's about 6.5 units.
6.5 units. Okay, that's the number I was looking for, so, okay. Thank you.
Mr. Chair, the traffic study was done in April of last year.
I almost hate to ask this question. I'd probably put you in a spot where you have to speculate a little bit, but if the the height were limited to 3 stories, would that just mean an immediate reduction of that number of units, do you think, off the project?
It depends on the setbacks. The setbacks are a key issue. Obviously, we like pushing the buildings as close to State Street as we can. In my opinion, there's a lot of noise and traffic generated from State Street. And the buildings themselves provide a buffer so that that noise does not travel further west into the neighborhood. Doesn't stop all the traffic. We don't have full control over the intersection, but it does provide a buffer between the impacts of State Street and the others. So setbacks are a key issue. If it were to drop to 3 stories, the owners would have to review that and look at their financial pro forma. But obviously, the number of units would probably be reduced if it were to go to 3 stories.
Thank you. Any other questions of the applicant? Okay, thank you. Go ahead and turn it over to the commission. Any deliberation, hashing out, anything?
I'll start out by talking about the prying eyes. I understand the issue. I hear it. I know it's a real thing. That said, I live in a neighborhood with a 2-story house right next to me and a 4-foot fence on the other side, with a neighbor maybe 100 yards away from me. And there's a grand total of maybe 6 square feet in my whole backyard where somebody can't see into my backyard. There's no 3-story or 4-story building. So I don't think that there's I think that having eyes in your backyard is, whether it's a new thing or not, it might be a new thing, but I'm sure there are hundreds of homes where people don't have privacy in their backyard. Where that might be a change now, that's another thing. But it's an issue that many of us deal with every day. So we move our swimming pool to the 6 square feet that we have that nobody can see, or we raise our fences. The other thing is the sight line. If you're going from 3 feet or 3 stories, from 4 stories to 3 stories, you're already putting in 3 stories. Does one more story really matter? Especially with the setback from the neighborhood that you've got, at least pushed to the east. Now on the north side, that's a little bit different, but you've got immediately adjacent to the north side, commercial. The one garage there with the gray roof notwithstanding. It's just, in my mind, I'm questioning what difference does it really make? Where it really makes a difference to me, 4 stories to 3 stories, and it's not about the stories, it's about the parking numbers. That's the only thing that brings me to say, can we reduce? And gaining 6.5 units worth of parking in the area, I don't know if you'd even gain that, especially if by going medium density, you increase the setback off the street. Now you kind of reduced your parking a little bit as well, potentially, if that happens. So, I'm inclined to say I'm fine with the project as it's proposed, but I can also say, for the sake of parking, I could stand to see it go to a medium density residential.
If I can just add to what you've said, I'm looking at Google Earth and the satellite view, and I don't see a lot of high, solid fences in the neighborhood already. So I'm not sure that this hasn't been a concern in the neighborhood. So I'm not really sure how much impact that it would have on the privacy issue by having the 3 or a 4-story apartment house.
Mr. Chairman, if I may indulge, my father grew up on 5th South where the train station was, and it's no longer there. And my mother grew up on 3rd North, and she's got the same situation you do. So I just want you to know that I come from a background where I understand, and I'm hearing what you're saying. I think what you've said tonight reflects a lot of the challenges the city as a whole is wrestling with, because we're a popular town and people want to move here. And we've got a combination of longtime Provoans and students. The neighborhood, to me, seems like it is in transition, and clearly, to me, I was going to just ask the staff maybe to summarize the three proposals before us, because it seems to me like it is an appropriate place, if you're going to have high-density housing, to have it near State Street, given the width of that street. And I do understand where you're coming from. Of all the places you've got to put things like this and accommodate your grandkids who might move into those places, it seems like an appropriate place. And so maybe with that, I can ask for some guidance.
Commissioner Ellsworth, do you have anything you want to add? And relative to guidance you're looking for?
It looks like we're looking to change the zone and something to do with some lots. And I'm just trying to get a package understanding of where we're headed with this.
Three separate requests, ultimately resulting in the proposal to build 64 units on the property. Before the city could approve a project plan for that, the zoning would need to be changed. And before the zoning can be changed, it's appropriate to change the general plan. So we've got that kind of order of events in front of us. And
it's all wrapped up with this thing.
Yeah, it's a big package. It's quite a bit to bite off all at once. Frankly, I think I like how it's been prepared by staff and presented to us tonight. But it's a lot.
So on the first two items, you're only a recommending body. The first two items, the general plan amendment, the zone change, you're recommending something to the city council. On the third item, the project plan, you are the decision-making body on that one.
Let me add one more thing, just to Mr. Howard's comments. This, and that's one of the things I was going to say. I didn't write it down, so I forgot it. But you're absolutely right that this is the exact spot where you want something, some sort of infill, where there's some density, because it is right on a main corridor. And it's so close to a street where it's corridor, and then you hit a city street for a few yards, and then you're right into the property. Now, somebody could argue that people are going to come in from 5th South. I would disagree. There's not a lot of traffic that needs to come over from that direction that can't come from 3rd South, or that can't come from, from South County up State Street. So, I mean, this is the perfect location to put some sort of high-density infill on this large of a corridor. It's been done, the precedent's there in the city. And as far as the infill goes, I think this is a good use.
I'd just like to add that I too appreciate the residential change on this property, because I'm afraid that if we kept this a commercial zone, it would look like the car lots that we have in this area, or the rental units that, what do you call those? Rental units, storage units, thank you. Storage units that we have in this area. And I live just a mile or so south of here, and it's just not a great entrance or face to our city. So I appreciate that. Then I would also say that any concerns with parking relative to the units across State Street really shouldn't affect this development, because there may be insufficient parking there. However, those were decisions made by a different developer at a different time, so hopefully we can consider this within its own context.
I do have one question. Are people parking on State Street currently?
I believe it's legal.
They can. It's legal.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I see the cars on there. I just didn't know if they were, I don't know what, but okay.
Thank you. Anything else?
I did have one question for staff, and that is the staff recommendation that lots be combined into one lot as a part of a separate application. and I'm not sure if I understand completely what that means. You've got this lot on the north, and then you've got the lot on the southeast. And how does that come into play in this?
Yeah, so currently there's a lot line in this area. So this is one lot and this is another lot.
Oh, so you're talking about on the same plot?
Same,
there.
yes, the same parcel. So
One of the things that we got had the other outlined here on the southeast, and I didn't know what that was all about. I thought maybe that was one whole thing that they were looking to do something with.
yeah,
So
that's just the general
don't look
plan
at that.
map that you're
Okay.
looking at. Yep.
Got it. Thanks.
Once again, thank you. Anything else? If not, I have a lot of thoughts, most of which have already been shared by my colleagues here, and I agree with what they've said. So let me start with this one. Traffic, that's been discussed as a concern. Of the concerns that we've heard tonight, that's probably the one that I'm the least worried about. Without a doubt, development here is going to cause traffic to some measure work its way to the west, back through that neighborhood. I think that's going to be the case with literally anything that is located on this property, and that certainly the great propensity of trips is going to be out to State Street and away from the neighborhood. In fact, I'm surprised that 64 units here would have impacted the level of service the way the traffic study said that it would. There must be a threshold that was already very nearly being reached there. I understand that traffic's always a concern, but relative to land use on this site, that's probably not a really big deal for me in terms of how it might have an adverse impact on the surrounding area. And that being said, I do think 30 plus units to the acre on this site is really aggressive. I think 4 stories is pretty aggressive. I appreciate some things that you get with 4 stories that maybe you don't get with something that's a little bit less tall. But I appreciated one of the area residents that commented on, to some degree, the idea of having some continuity in an area like this, and having 4 stories right on the corner there, where you really don't have anything of that kind of bulk and mass on the side of the street. That's a pretty abrupt thing to have there. At the same time, I think this is precisely the kind of corner where you'd want to see something that is fairly intense, a little bit higher density housing. Commercial clearly, I think, has been shown to not be the best use of that property. So that probably for me is the biggest issue. Just, what is the appropriate line to draw relative to the bulk and mass of those buildings? I think I have a question for staff, and I kind of feel like the project at 700 North and 900 East might kind of haunt us for a while. But I think it also might be a good way to illustrate the concern of not having some space and something living between a building and a street. It seems like this design treats that immediate relationship between the street and the building differently. There is still some setback. It's not 20 feet. Do you know exactly what kind of dimensions we're talking about there?
Yeah, so the setback is 10 feet in this. It's a max setback, and they're at the max setback of 10 feet. So other projects in that type of zone could go to 0 feet to property line. This one's choosing to meet the max, which is 10 feet. So it is different in that regard, that it is utilizing the whole setback allowed for that zone.
So you have between the curb and the sidewalk a park strip of 8 feet, maybe 10, something like that. And then you have the 10 feet from the sidewalk to the building in addition to that. So the building itself is, and I'm not trying to put words in your mouth, but just kind of maybe thinking out loud, some 20 feet from the street as proposed.
Yeah, you'll have, from the property line, you'll have 10 feet back before the building would start. So, whereas in the other example that you described, it's at property line.
So I really appreciate that about this versus having no setback over there.
The other big difference in that project is the building itself takes up the entire site, where you can see with the buildings pushed to one side on 9th and 7th, 9th East and 7th North, the building footprint. There are two buildings there, but they pretty much take up the entire site.
Yeah. So for me, I guess, just kind of to maybe cut to the chase, it's all about 3 stories versus 4. I'm inclined to sort of push for 3 and not 4, but and might even suggest this. I think some of the concerns that have been raised relative to, and let me just talk about this for a second too. I do think that in areas like this that undoubtedly are going to go through some land use changes, they're somewhat ripe for some new development, some redevelopment and that sort of a thing. These kinds of proposals have to be anticipated. At the same time, I think that some of the neighborhoods that immediately surround sites like this, they're becoming, I feel, almost more rare than we want them to. Places where you have some single-family detached homes, places that maybe are affordable enough that people can purchase them at a relatively young age, spend some time in that property with a family, provide some neighborhood stability, a little less turnover and that sort of a thing. So that relationship that's created between the new infill development and the surrounding neighborhood, I think really needs to be given a lot of care, and that even appropriately deference needs to be given to the neighbors that are impacted, whether it's a perceived impact or otherwise. I almost see an opportunity here for 1 4-story and 1 3-story building, maybe as a way to kind of help address that concern of how the building that's closest to the dwellings might have an impact on them. And again, even with that, I feel like that's a pretty aggressive proposal for a site like this, particularly given how things have developed across the street, where you've got some big structures, but still the bulk. I'm kind of gathering from this that 4 stories here would be noticeably greater than what you do have across the street. And I think that's enough for me. So we do have 3 separate items that are before the commission right now.
I'm ready to make a motion.
Can I ask one question? How realistic is it to ask the developer for a 3-story building and a 4-story building? Because I had the same thought. Is that realistic? Does that happen?
That as a potential option. Again, assuming you're speculating here.
I'm speculating because I'm not, I don't speak to that.
Thanks.
Hi, Kenan Sandlin with Terracom Development, 1863 East Hickory Ridge Court. The biggest question is, there's a lot of expense to have a flatter roof. And we took that into account when you talked about the sightlines. So the building across the street is virtually the same exact height as us being a 4-story. So I guess if we went to a 3-story, besides economically it does cost more money, but you'd go back up to the pitch roofs anyways. So you're going to end up being the same exact height as what you'd be across the street.
What if it were 3 stories with a maximum height?
Well,
so that it wasn't a pitched roof,
with both
so that it was
zonings,
flat.
we actually meet the current zoning even for the medium or the high density.
The current zoning's commercial.
I'm sorry, for either the medium density or the higher density for the
What's
multifamily.
proposed, you're saying?
Correct.
Yeah.
That's correct. Yeah, it's, to go to 3 stories, you're going to go from 64 to 48 units. And then, it's a lot.
48 units on just under 2 acres that's a lot of units, in my view. Just
Yeah, I could see that, but if you were to go with the lower density, it'd be 6 units less for us to go with that.
I appreciate that, and just honestly, I haven't heard necessarily that any of us have big concerns about the number of units and that density, But I think the design, and I'm only speaking for myself, it really is critical in how that new building there orients to the neighbors is something we need to really get right.
Sure. You know, I completely understand that, but I think if you're going to say, you know what, 3 stories is going to save, it's not going to feel like a big building. It's going to actually be about the same size, you know, because of the pitched roof. And we just will be, I mean, you can clearly see if you compare the parking to what they have next door, compare this to you know, other projects. I think we went over, you know, way beyond what we need to, you know, feel like that we need to do to make this a really great site. I mean, this is really, could be a great project that could really benefit the area and bring value to the neighborhoods around it. So hopefully I answered your question, or.
I appreciate that. I think that's what we're all working towards, is trying to make it.
I agree, and I appreciate you guys.
Best that we can, and simply relative to the feasibility kind of issue of 3 versus 4 stories. It's my understanding that you could build a 3-story building with a flat roof that simply would have less overall.
Well, you
bulk
probably
than a
could, but then it's
4-story.
just more expense, you know, which.
Right.
You know, it just adds on more cost with less units now to help absorb the cost.
Right. That's, I think, understood.
Causes higher rents and possibly not even have it happen. Sir?
I got to ask, how about a 3.5 story? So you take the lower floor and you sink half of it like they've done across the street.
Here we go.
Pushing the buildings about a half level into the floor was something that was popular 20, 25, 30 years ago. One of the issues that we face nowadays is the Accessibility Act. And so by depressing the buildings down, it makes access to those units very, very difficult. And so any buildings that you see built today will be at grade on the main level, so that you have those bottom level units accessible and available to the public.
Will the building have an elevator?
In this 4-story building, no, it will not. There will be stairs that go up the 4 levels.
So apparently you can meet the ADA requirements by having a certain number of apartments that are accessible from grade.
From grade, yes.
Okay.
Any other discussion before we ask for a motion on item number 1? Staff?
So if I understood Commissioner Elzor's question correctly, if the Planning Commission is inclined to grant any type of approval with restrictions less than what the zone allows, more restrictions than what the zone would permit, you would need to recommend to the City Council that there be a development agreement that would talk about or elaborate on those restrictions, because if the zoning is given, what is permitted in that zone is what can be done.
So that would be tied to item number 2.
Mm-hmm.
Yes. Yeah, and probably items 2 and 3.
Okay.
I
want to start with the easy one. I'm going to make a motion
I think we're done with the public comment. Thank you, though.
that we recommend approval of item 1, moving the general plan map and making the amendment from commercial to residential, with the staff recommendation that the lots are combined into one lot as part of a separate application.
We have a motion. Do we have a second?
Second.
Thank you. That was Commissioner Jones. Any discussion on the motion? Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? That was 5-0. Okay. Item number 2.
Anybody chomping at the bit for this one?
Get a little messy here, maybe?
Yeah, I'm happy to continue on.
Go ahead, you're on a roll.
I will make a motion that we recommend approval of item number 2, changing the zone from general commercial to high-density residential for the lot with the note that, as the staff has recommended, that there be a development agreement entered into that restricts the building height to 3 stories, and that the lots, secondly, the lots are combined into one lot as part of a separate application.
Have a motion. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
Thank you. Commissioner Ellsworth?
Commissioner Howard.
Commissioner
That's all right.
Howard, sorry. Any discussion on the motion? Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Once again, let me just make sure I get this. Any opposed? I thought I heard everybody. Okay. Once again, unanimous. That was 5-0. Item number 3. The project plan approval. So this would be done subject to the city council acting on items 1 and 2 favorably.
We didn't really get a lot into the materials, but it seems like they're going to be what's required, what's mandated,
It's been the design review committee.
and it's approved.
It was
Okay.
well received there.
Okay, great, thank you. I don't want to steal anybody else. Go ahead.
Mr. Chairman, I recommend that we approve item 3 for an approval of a 64-unit apartment complex located at 422 to 490 South State Street, subject to the staff's recommendations. 1, that the general plan amendment and rezone are approved by the city council. 2, building height is limited to 3 stories as a part of a development agreement with the rezone. 3, lots are combined into one lot as a part of the separate application, and CRC approval is received.
I would like to second that on one condition, and maybe a friendly. In the reading of the item, it refers specifically to a 64-unit apartment complex, and I would second this if you would scratch the 64-unit.
Because as,
that.
roger that, I so strike.
Okay.
And so
Seconded.
amend.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion on the motion? Okay, great. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Once again, unanimous. Thank you. Thank you all for coming tonight and sharing your thoughts. Thank you. And moving on, item number 4. It's also a public hearing. We'll go ahead and start with staff's presentation.
Developer can still. Oh, did you read it in?
Thank you again for the hand-holding. Item number 4 is a proposed text amendment to the zoning ordinance that would result in a change in the number of students that somebody could have with a major home occupation. Currently, the limit is 6. The change would take it to 16 and expand the hours of operation to 9 p.m.
Okay, there we go. Thank you. So just to kind of begin with a little bit of clarification, in Provo City Code, we have what's called home occupations. That's governed by section chapter 1441, and Alyssa has brought this one up just so we can look at it a little bit if anybody has any questions, but I'll go through and explain it a little bit. In Provo, we have what are considered minor home occupations and major home occupations. If you imagine with me for a minute, a minor home occupation is something like somebody would have an office in their home, like if they're an attorney or maybe a real estate agent or something like that. Very minimal impact. You would not know that someone was operating any type of business out of their home. Somebody doing piano lessons, up to like 2 students at a time per hour kind of thing, or a family daycare with no more than 6 children. Those are considered minor home occupations, relatively benign. No impacts to surrounding land uses or things like that. We do also in Provo have what's called a major home occupation. These types of operations are still relatively benign. The idea is that you would not know that someone is operating a business out of their home, but just based on the intensity of what's going on there, we require what's called a conditional use permit, just to make sure that if there are any impacts, then we can assess those and then add any conditions that might be necessary. In this case, our applicant has already applied for a conditional use permit to operate a dance school, an art school, if you will, where they'll offer dance classes, music classes, improv, and acting out of their home. They have, actually, Alyssa, thank you. We can go to just the slides now. And I have some slides of what they've actually offered in their home. And I'll give so this is the applicant's current home, and I just want to make the caveat that the applicant has specifically applied for this, but because it's a text amendment, this would apply universally throughout our city. And so this is more for demonstration purposes that we're using this. The applicant has created in their basement of their home, which is right here, a studio per se, where they would offer dance classes, piano lessons, all sorts of different things. The conditional use permit that they applied for, the administrative hearing was held a few weeks ago, and we actually continue that based on the application that we have before you. So we'll go into that now. So what the applicant is requesting is that we amend section 1441-060 relating to major home occupations to allow outside employees the opportunity to work at the premises instead of ending at 5 p.m., extending those hours to 9 p.m. And then also they have added some additional text there at the bottom in number 6 that the number of students coming to a dwelling unit for instructional classes may range up to 16 per hour. Currently, we limit that to 6 per hour. There's a question of semantics here because we regulate it to 6 per hour. If you look in number 1, it says the number of customers coming to a dwelling unit may range up to 6 per hour. We think that the difference between customer and student is semantic, so that could be very well easily interpreted to be the same thing. So essentially they just want to increase the number of people that can come to a home per hour from 6 to 16, and then the time limit where outside employees can be there. We have reviewed this application and have some pretty significant concerns regarding this application and the proposed impacts that it would have on a neighborhood. For example, just using the applicant's specific application in mind, currently, the applicant actually has a website posted, and they've been very generous with the information that they've given. This is just a schedule of the first 4 weeks of January. Week 5 did not make it onto this slide, but all told, the applicant has scheduled about 87 classes per month, and they employ currently about 10 outside employees, and the idea is for those employees to rotate throughout the day. Just given the number of students, that would, if every class currently was filled, that would be about 522 students coming and going from their home per month. At 6 students, which is what they're currently allowed. Multiplying that to 16 at the same number of classes is just under 1,400 students per month. So we, as staff, have significant concerns regarding how that would impact a neighborhood with regards to traffic, with regards to off-street parking, and even more so with the nature of the neighborhood, how that would change a residential neighborhood where the intent of this is that you're not even aware that something like this is going on, to what we see as a full-fledged commercial operation. And so for those reasons, we have recommended that the Planning Commission forward a recommendation to this municipal council to deny this application. So that's all that I have and available for questions.
Would you please confirm that this is citywide, that this would apply to all residential zones throughout the city?
That is correct.
Any other questions for staff?
I always have a good one, or maybe not a good one. Yeah.
There's no dumpster.
Where's the dumpster? I love it. Is this tied to a home business, or is it tied to the home residence? Meaning, a young single adult group gets together for a family home evening at somebody's home, and there's 30 kids for 2 hours. They've exceeded the thing, right? It's not tied to having a business per se, correct?
So this is tied to having a home occupation.
Right.
So where they're actually a home-based business.
So absolutely. So it only counts for a business.
Correct.
Okay. So
if you're having your family reunion.
That's right. Your family reunion, the Super Bowl party or whatever else. It's the business where it stops it at a number. Okay. Thank you.
So it's the exchange of cash.
And the ongoing commerce that's happening. I mean, anybody might have a party once in a while at their home or something like that. We recognize that, but this is the impact of continual operation in a residential neighborhood.
Thanks.
Anything else? Staff?
Is there any other city that permits 16 students or people per hour like this?
Not to my knowledge, but I have not researched that.
Okay, just checking. Thanks.
Goshen. There's more parking out there.
They wish they had 6.
Right. Anything else? Okay, wonderful. Is the applicant here with us tonight?
Johnson.
We'd love to hear anything you'd like to share with us about the proposal.
Okay. So first of all, kind of crazy that we're going through this process because we had thought that we had received permission even before we began building this home. I have taught voice and piano for many years from my home. We just lived 9 blocks south of this home, and we had been looking for a while, or thinking about for a while, doing something that a lot of other people are doing in other cities all throughout the valley, having dance studios and schools in their homes. And so when we found this location so close to where we already were, and that they were putting in basements, Ivory Homes, we contacted Ivory Homes and we asked them about our plans to put in a performing arts school. And they said that we would need to contact Provo City. So we did. We contacted Provo City and we told them we are planning on starting a performing arts school in our basement, and if that was permitted. And about 4 or 5 days later, we received a call back and they said, yep, you're good to go. You guys can go ahead and build your home. So build the school. So we did.
Who called you back? Ivory Homes?
Sorry?
You said Ivory Homes called you back?
So when we spoke with Ivory Home about our plans, they told us that we needed to contact Provo City and see if it would be within code. And so that's what we had done. We called, we asked about them, told them that we were going to build a performing arts school, and they called us back within that week and they told us, yes, go ahead, you can do it. So we put money down and started with our plans. This was in November of 2015 was when we found the lot, and we contacted them. I want to say it was December, January 2016. And then we put money down when they opened up the lots in March. So we went into this completely thinking that we had permission to do so. Otherwise, we would not have built here. We would have gone to another place. So that's the thing that, so when my husband was filling out all the paperwork, because I also just wanted to add to that, that we totally want to be in compliance with the law. Like, that was why we chose that lot. That was every decision was based on trying to do things in consideration of our neighborhood and our neighbors and the city and the law. So I just wanted that to be known. So when my husband filled out all the paperwork and was doing everything for our permit and went in, they said, oh, by the way, did you know that you can only teach until 5 and you can only have 6 students per class? That was like, just completely destroyed everything, because for these reasons. Our teachers, I want to point something out with our schedule. We have planned everything so that there's one class at a time. There are no other classes going on. It's one teacher, one class at a time. So our teachers are either students themselves or they have day jobs. So they work or go to school until 3 or 5 p.m. And so they can't teach until after that. The second thing is our students, they go to school, and they go to school until 3:30. And so they couldn't come to a class until 4 o'clock. So that kind of makes it so that we could only have one class a day one class per day. And that just won't work for what we have in mind and what our vision is for the school. We have one thing, Ivory Homes, when they were selling their lots, we were phase 1. They actually told all of the applicants, people who are interested in building in the neighborhood, they used our school as a selling point feature. Oh, and there's going to be dance class for, your children to just walk to the dance studio right here. And so everyone that built in our neighborhood knew that we were going to be there. Provo School of the Arts was there. When we were asked to receive the signatures of all of our neighbors, we got everyone's signature except for a woman who seems to not live in her home, not be there. We have not been able to find her, reach her. No one's seen her, knows anything about her. So that's why we had to pay the money to move forward with the permit. Okay, so we have everyone's approval. If you go to our Lakeview North neighborhood page, you will see that all of the people who live around us, they have all commented on there. In fact, came to our meeting a few weeks ago in support. We have a letter of the people who live directly across the street from the entrance, the north entrance of the school, in total favor and approval of our school. The reasons for this are because of our lot. We have a chapel directly behind us that has a parking lot. We have the permission. If you could put an image of our school, yes, the aerial. We have the school right there. Within another block, there's another LDS chapel and Lakeview Elementary. We are 6 homes away from Provo High School and the new lot that there will be another school. So we chose a location based on being in a community school district area. The street that we're on has a big green strip right there, so there's no homes that are immediately facing the school. That 1390 North is a wide street that's going to connect from the Lakeview Parkway to Geneva Road. So it's a main street already, which is what we wanted. We actually originally wanted to be on the lot that's on the corner of Lakeview Drive across the street from Provo High, but that was phase 2 and it hadn't been begun yet. So we went with this one because we felt like it was a perfect location. Most of our students currently, right now, we have 2 classes that are going that fit within the rules. We have our Littles AM class and about beginning ballet class that's going on. And specific direction is given to the parents that they must drop off their students. They cannot drive on 3200 West because that's the front of the home and other residences. They have to drop off and leave. They cannot linger and loiter. They cannot hang out. That's one of our rules that we specify, and we really make it a point that you guys, this is a residential area. You have to have respect for our neighborhood. So with all of these things in consideration and the support of all of our neighbors and the way that our classes are planned to be one class at a time, so it's not going to be 1,400, however many it was at one time. Yeah, I don't know. I think I'm kind of getting distracted. Do you want to add anything?
Yeah, my name is John Johnson. I'm her husband. And, if you look at that picture, that green strip, the homes behind it to the north of it, that's their backyard. So no one on 1390 North that's directly across the street from us even looks at anything going on there. And the neighbor that wrote this letter in favor of that is on the corner of 3200 West and 30 North. And so their front of their house faces north. Anyway, so that green strip is 330 feet long. It's huge. So there's tons of parking if, there had to be lots of parking. And like my wife already said, there's the church right there. So there's literally no homes except for ours on 1390 North on that section of the block. Okay, enough said about that. The other thing I wanted to say is and if you want to go there, you can, 1441.50. It talks about, this is your .50, which is your minor home occupations. You do mention students, and up to 2 students can be, see number 4 there, provided the number of students is limited to 2 at a time. I don't know who wrote that, but what dance studio has 2 students in it? I mean, I've taken my kids to classes in Confidence, different neighborhood ones, and there was 15, 20, I don't really know exactly, but there was way more than 2. Anyway, my point is, in your 14.41.60, under major home occupations, there's nothing listed about students. Now, you're saying it's just semantics between customers and students, but when I go to Walmart, I'm not a student. I'm a customer, and I go there whenever I want. I buy stuff, and I leave. We're not selling product, so to speak. And so I do think that there needs to be a statement in the code about students in the major home occupation. I think you've listed it in the minor. I think it needs to be listed in the major. And notice, if you want to go to .60, major home occupations, I specifically did not cross out item number, where is it? Where it says number one. Because that, to me, talks about customers coming to buy product. They're going to come and go whenever they want. And they're going to need parking. I totally get that. The type of home occupation that we're doing is not people coming and buying product and parking their cars and staying there. People are going to drop their kids off and then they're going to leave. And so I added number 6 on the major that specifically addressed students. And I'm hoping that, if you guys feel that 16 is just, absurdly huge, that at least something will be provided for, to list students more than 6. I know I have a neighbor who has a preschool, and she said that she's been given permission to have 8. So, I don't know, I just feel like Provo City needs to do something to allow more people to follow the law by signing up for a permit and getting a permit. I think a lot of people just don't even do it because they know that they can't legally do it, so they just don't do it. Sure, we've said a lot, so.
Just one more thing, and what most of the people, I mean, it would be great if we could go up to the Facebook page, the Lakeview North Facebook page, and then you can see the comments of all of our neighbors. Most people say that being on the west side, to take your kids to piano lessons or voice lessons or dance or whatever, they have to drive somewhere clear across town, and they love the idea of being able to have their kids just walk from home to take class. That's been what most people have said. I've got this letter, I don't know if it's been forwarded, of our neighbor across the street, the comments that they've made about parking, like right here.
I can read it in during public testimony.
Sorry?
I can read it in during public testimony.
Okay, awesome.
Perfect.
Oh, okay.
That'd be great. So I'm sure you've got questions for us.
Any questions from the commission, the applicants?
What number is going to work for you between 6 and 16?
Well,
we don't have that many people registered. We're new, I mean, we originally, before this became an issue, when we in our first original plans, were thinking that we would like to maybe in a couple of years, once Lakeview Parkway goes in and then there's some development in that, we thought, well, maybe we'll get to the point where we need, because we're only so big. And so maybe we'll get to the point where we need to build a full school, and we can build it on Lakeview Parkway.
Go commercial.
And go commercial over there. Like, this would be our starting.
And I asked the question because it sounds like you built the home with the expectation or the hopes that you could have any number you wanted. And Provo City was correct in telling you that you could do what you wanted to do.
Right.
There were just numbers. And so, I mean, are you going to lose your house if you don't have 16 people or?
So the reason for the 16 is the size of the dance studio. So we're like around 20 by 40. And so comfortably, like 12 kids. I personally don't like the huge, large classes, but we were just thinking 16, like as the maximum.
We're asking big and hoping that we'll get something in between. So,
Well,
a dozen would be great.
This has citywide impact, which I think is strikes right at the heart of this. And anyone who's been in any neighborhood, you don't know the ramifications of what will follow, and we can't possibly get into that right here tonight.
I understand that any changes that would be made, or if they will be made, will affect everybody citywide. So I totally get that. And
The thing is, that's been interesting to me is how many people, even people that we've spoken to in meeting with the mayor and deputy mayor and in our last meeting, it's been interesting to me how many people have said, well, why are you guys doing that? Why are you guys trying to get a permit? I mean, nobody does that. Just do it. And
the mayor didn't say that, by the way.
No, I'm not saying that. But I'm just saying, but that strikes me as like, well, because we want to do things
The right way, yeah.
the right way. So
No, and kudos to you because it sounds like your plan was well thought out, well planned, other than the number. But, I mean, you guys have looked at every accommodation, and that's fantastic. That's more than a lot of actual businesses do. But when we bring it back for discussion here, you'll hear a lot more things that are, that weigh into this and the decision that'll have to be made.
So when I understand that, what I don't understand is what Mayor Kaufusi said, was that she's like, it should be on an case-by-case situation. You know, whether it's approved of by the neighbors, whether the location fit, just like we were discussing those apartments, does the location fit the project? Does our location fit our major home occupation? Why does it have to be like that anyone who lives on a cul-de-sac in a teeny tiny neighborhood, they can put a down studio? It's not one size fits all. It's location, location, location.
Can I just add to that? I agree with Mayor Kaufusi there, if that's what she said. But if we are going to make it that specific, we would also need to make it specific to each neighbor. So as soon as a neighbor disagrees, then would your permit be invalid? Or as soon as someone moves and the new neighbor disagrees, then would your conditional use permit be invalid? So there is a lot of safety in having broader regulations.
Right, I understand that.
Yeah,
And
right.
that makes sense. And that makes sense. One more thing. What if we had a year and see how we do? And don't we have to renew our permit every year? Is that how it goes? No?
Yes, and the home
Our
occupation.
license, I'm sorry, I don't know.
But in this case, it's a
Not a
text
conditional
amendment.
use permit.
That's
Say
right.
that.
It goes forever until it's changed, so.
Well, what I was saying is, like, what if we did a year and if there was issues and complaints of our neighbors, then we would have to change.
I don't think it's that easy for us to put the genie back in the bottle.
Right.
Yeah.
Citywide.
And just the last thing, I know we requested the time from, to go till 9. And my wife did speak a little bit about that, but a lot of businesses stay open later, and with the church right there, Provo High is going to come online in the fall. That is not going to be a quiet neighborhood. It's just not. And our proposed home occupation would not add noise because it's in our basement and I've soundproofed everything, so.
And people have said that they haven't heard a thing, so. We're mindful of our neighborhood. We're mindful of what we're doing. We wanted to do this right, and we wanted to do it in a place that didn't create problems. So.
Thank you.
Neighborhood chair, citywide, so I think we'll just go neighborhood chairs. And before maybe I forget, we did receive some comments via email from the River Bottoms neighborhood chair, Dave Rosen. I don't really want to read it.
I've read it.
Okay, if we read it, are you folks privy to what Mr. Rosen shared?
Yes. In the staff meeting notes, is that what you're talking about?
No, this is coming since the staff report.
I've got a copy if you'd like.
I've read it.
Okay. Any neighborhood chairs there?
I'm actually wearing 3 hats tonight, so I hope you'll bear with me. First, I'd like to speak as Lakeview North Neighborhood Chair. We did send this out to our Facebook page, and we've talked to several of the neighbors. First off, I want to say Laura and John are great and amazing people. I appreciate so much the effort that they've taken to include the neighborhood, to find what they can do to mitigate the issues that people have, what they can do to accommodate the neighborhood. It's been amazing. If more people did that in the city, I think we'd have a lot less problems. So I really appreciate the efforts that they've made. And it's true on the neighborhood Facebook page, and also when talking within the neighborhood, about 75% of the people are in favor of this. They want to support them in their efforts, and they want to support them in moving forward in what they've chosen to do with their lives. You do have a couple comments from the neighbors. I talked between 50 and 60 people who I've talked to around the neighborhood. There have been some concerns. One of them is parking, which is always a concern in the neighborhood. The street that is on the west side of their house, that their house faces, is actually part of a CCNR that does not allow on-street parking. So any on-street parking would have to be on 1390. There has been comments made before that the church parking lot could be used as access parking. Yeah, and
And the
you know,
church says it can't.
yeah, that wouldn't happen. And I know that this is a drop off and pickup situation where that they don't actually have people parking and staying, except the question by one of the residents is, what if there's a recital? You don't, no recitals? Oh. Okay. Excellent question taken care of. So as Lakeview North Neighborhood Chair, many of the neighbors are in support of this and want to wish them all the best in going forward with this. Stepping into my second role as area representative, I've talked with the other neighborhood chairs in the area, and I do have a email from one of them and also another neighborhood chair coming. The concerns that have been brought up is commercial. One of them is commercial encroachment upon a neighborhood. How much impact do we really want to see upon the neighborhoods in the city? It's as is sorry, I always get nervous standing up here. I'm so sorry. As the amendment is now, it specifically states to not have a presence known. And I think with 16 students, that will drastically change that. And that, I'm sorry, 16 little kids coming in and out of a house every hour, you're gonna know what's going on. It's not something that you're not gonna be aware of. Traffic along 1390 it's a collector road, so it's not as big an issue, but one of the other issues is since the high school is going in, and we are concerned about what traffic changes are gonna happen around there, how that's gonna impact the neighborhood. As for citywide, there are a lot of neighborhoods that would not be able to handle such changes. There are narrow streets, there's not off-street parking to accommodate it. The commercial encroachment, I talked to a lady in East Provo, and she said, well, hey, if this amendment gets changed, you're going to have a lot more commercial people who are going to move to their houses because it's a lot less expensive to run a business out of your house than it is to buy commercial property or run out off a commercial property. So as an area rep, I would have to say, please don't pass this. Do you want me to read Jonathan's email now, or do you want me to wait? Go ahead. Okay. So Jonathan Hill is the Fort Utah Neighborhood Chair. As chair of the Fort Utah neighborhood, I oppose the proposed changes to the major home occupation business license. Although I understand that the applicants have worked with their neighbors to address any concerns and those neighbors support the idea, the ordinance as written would not only affect them but the entire city. In my neighborhood, we have several people that teach various types of music or dance lessons, have recording studios in their home, or perform welding and other mechanical work in their garages. These changes would allow all of them, as well as anyone else who wishes to open up a new business, to have large numbers of people in their home, lengthen hours, and increase staff, all without the same promises and assurances that these applicants have made to their neighbors. Such a change would cause traffic, parking, and noise issues in many Provo neighborhoods, degrading the quality of life for the residents who happen to live near at-home businesses. Please do not approve this proposal. Okay, any questions for me?
I do have one quick question.
Yes.
Would this work in the home right next door to you?
No, we live in a cul-de-sac, and I can't imagine 16 cars coming in and out of a cul-de-sac every hour.
You said you're the area rep. Do you know of any of the other neighborhood chairmen or chairpersons who are in favor of this?
None of the other ones were in favor of this.
How many, to your knowledge?
There are 6 neighborhoods in my area. Brian Taylor from Sunset has been an empathetic no. Kathy Sorensen from Provo Bay has also been a no. She doesn't want that in commercial encroachment. Becky Bogdan is here, that's from Lakewood, and she can speak for herself, but that's also a no. Scott Jurgensen was a soft no, but it was more of a conditional possible variances, but as has been explained, the state won't allow variances on conditional use permits. Oh, sorry, I don't know if that was specifically explained, but that was explained to me at one point in time when we were looking for alternatives, that the state doesn't allow variances on conditional use permits, so.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Any other?
Anything else? Okay, thank you. Any other neighborhood chairs? Like to address the commission?
While the next neighborhood chair is coming up, I'd just like to clarify something. Mayor Kafusi was correct in that conditional use permits are site-specific. A conditional use permit, you look at the characteristics of that site and decide whether or not the conditional use permit should be granted. In Ms. Alligood's case, where the house at the end of a cul-de-sac, the fact that it's at the end of a cul-de-sac may make it so it would be unwise to grant that conditional use permit. When this application shifted from that request, going to a major home occupation, to a code amendment to go even beyond that, all the ground rules change.
Yeah.
Now we're on a code amendment that has citywide effect, and that's what you're hearing.
Hi, my name is Terry McCabe. I'm the Franklin Neighborhood Chair. By profession, I am a certified athletic trainer, and I specialize in dance medicine. I've worked for the Radio City Rockettes, Cirque du Soleil, and the BYU Dance Training Facility. Home studios are the lifeblood of beginning dancers. However, from the staff report I read, I saw a potential class schedule with the variety of dance genres that are going to be taught. I was concerned about ceiling height. Does the studio have the height for the leaps, jumps, and lifts necessary to rehearse? I did not see a number for ceiling height, and 10 feet would be a minimum necessary. Another concern I have is continuing classes for minors until 9 p.m. In my dance medicine class that I teach, I have a whole lecture on overtraining. According to the European Journal of Sports Science, overtraining is the combination of excess overload plus inadequate recovery. By keeping dancers late up on a school night, the dancers are being prevented from resting physically and mentally. With my professional opinion, I would deny approval until the owners change the class schedule and provide ceiling height dimensions. I also want to add that with the minor, what was included in the minor home occupations, when you have two dance students, that's called ballroom dancing, and the competitive form is dance sport, since he didn't understand that answer. Any questions for me? Okay.
Evening, I'm Paul Evans. I'm chair for the Pleasant View neighborhood, which is the area immediately north of BYU. And over the past 15 years, we've had a number of situations where we've dealt with both minor and major home occupations in the neighborhood, and several situations in which businesses began in a home and then grew to the point that they needed to leave. They had grown too big for it, and in some cases, they had never even gotten a business license or home occupation permit to even have the business there to begin with. So the fact that these sorts of events occur, it happens, and it's great to have people who are trying to get it right the first time without having to deal with the enforcement issues. But so there's lots of examples of entrepreneurial successes that have originated in homes and bases and basements and rooms in homes in Provo. And at some point, those businesses reach those home-based businesses reach the point that they're no longer an incidental use of the house, but a major use of the house, and it begins to impact then the surrounding homes and the neighborhood. So, and every business thrives on location. And, obviously, location is a number one, but it's also number one for people who purchase homes. They purchase a home based on location and what's around it and what's surrounding it. And so it's always location, location, and location. So regardless of the proximity and convenience of a particular business activity to patrons of schools or churches or anything else, a business is a business. If it requires a business license, it's a commercial activity. And the people who use that activity, whether you call them patrons or customers or students, there's still traffic in and out. And it's not just 16 in the case per hour, but you have 16 leaving and 16 coming. And so it's at a very particular time point. Also, the idea that all patrons and all students or customers are just being dropped off is not consistent with the class structure, at least in this case, or in any sort of business, that you'll still have people who will drive themselves to the place to participate in an activity. So given that this is a city-wide sort of impact, the question really comes one that you can ask whether or not whether a home occupation or business is to be allowed in a home as an incidental activity. That's what's in there. And the ordinance, I like the first line of the ordinance, which states that the purpose is to encourage the majority of business activities to be conducted in appropriate commercial zones. It's not try to figure out how to make commercial work in residential. It's meant to say, look, commercial activities should occur in appropriate zones. So perhaps one rule of thumb in this and any other similar discussion might be, would the residential nature of an area be different if every home was permitted a home business with the same operating hours and the same numbers of customer visits? So please do not expand the home occupation ordinance. In fact, you might even consider reducing the number of customers since it's an open issue. Maybe it's a time to consider the issue of even further restricting businesses since it's an open agenda on changing the wording of the ordinance. So, any questions? Oh, I'm also curious to know who in the city said what and when. Names. So that's always an important thing. We have contracts that we sign in writing, and we know all the people who are involved. I'm still waiting to find out who in the city granted what permission and for what the discussion was. So, thank you.
Thank you.
Becky Bogdan, Lakewood Neighborhood Chair. I don't have a whole lot to say that hasn't been said. We do appreciate it and you going to your neighbors and getting the approval from your neighbors, but that's not the case in every single neighborhood. And this does affect every single neighborhood. And in Lakewood, this isn't something that we would like to see. And we would ask that you guys not recommend in favor of this ordinance. Thanks.
Thank you.
Sharon Memmott, Edgemont Neighborhood Vice Chair. And I do have some of these schools up in my neighborhood, and I have had to deal with them, and they are only the 6, possibly 8 students. That's what the website said, but 6 is what we'll go with, because that's all about I've seen. And even with just 6 students coming and going, as was pointed out, that's not just 6, that's 12. So we've just multiplied the traffic in what is a residential neighborhood, and I'm up near Days Market, so we've already kind of got that traffic going, and we can actually see the impact from these little schools as they dismiss and as they come bring their students to attend, and they don't stay. It's a preschool kind of a situation, but with that small of a number, we do see an impact. So increasing this, I would have said, well, let's consider increasing it even to 8. He's asking for more than 2.5 times that number. That's a huge impact on the neighborhoods. I would say maybe let them go till 7 o'clock. Also becoming a larger impact. If the intent and what's actually written in the code is that we're not supposed to really be aware that these things are going on, and that's just with 1 or 2 that I know of in my neighborhood. Imagine that if this is now in code, they have to grant, without some extremely reasonable reason not to, every house on the block now has all this traffic coming and going. And why shouldn't they? Because I want to do this school in my neighborhood. Please don't grant this change to the amendment. I always say it wrong, but please don't make this amendment to this. But I hope that they are granted their conditional use permit as it stands in code.
Thank you. I don't see any other neighborhood chairs. Anybody else here that would like to comment?
Can I just make one clarifying statement?
Please.
Regarding the time. The time change is just for outside employees. The homeowner that lives at the dwelling can extend beyond those hours.
Up to when? Is that till 9 o'clock, or is there a limit?
There's not a limit.
Okay, so if...
So theoretically, they could
be teach class.
Teaching piano at 11.
Okay. That helps quite a bit, I think, to understand that. Okay. Seeing nobody else here, are there any comments that have been raised that you guys want to take a quick minute to address? We've heard quite a bit. If not, then...
Mr. Anderson,
Yeah.
I do have one email from the
Thank
public.
you.
I can read that in if you'd like.
Please do.
Okay. This is from Cynthia Smith at 3183 West, 1530 North. To whom it may concern, my name is Cynthia Smith, and I reside across the street from the residence in question and current site of the Provo School of the Arts. I understand there is a question as to the possible neighborhood impact of the school. I would like to extend my commendation of the school and also to allay any worries as to the possible issues in extending the hours from 5 to 9 p.m. and increasing the numbers of students from 6 to 16. First of all, let me just address possible negatives and why I think there will be no impact. Parking. Number one, I live across the street and have never seen more than 2 cars parked by their house. 2, most students are local and walk or get rides from parents that drop them off. 3, they live on a corner and next to a very wide street. You could have multiple cars parked close without impacting the driving area at all. Number 4, they also live next door back onto a large LDS church building. The space around the church provides for a wide area of parking should it become necessary, without actually using the church's parking. Noise issues. Number 1, they have built a self-contained studio in their basement. Number 2, I have never heard noise coming from the studio. I suspect being in the basement really muffles any possible noise. Benefits of the time extension. Number 1, they could offer classes to older students who have after-school responsibilities. Number 2, it allows them to employ mothers and or young adults who have earlier work responsibilities. Number 3, it allows current students to take a variety of classes, one after another. Number 4, it allows local families to have access to several classes without driving a long distance. The benefits of it, the extension from 6 to 16. Number 1, speaking as a mom myself, this is a great addition to the community. It is so convenient to have my daughter be able to have easy access to such talent. Having additional students would just allow for better choreography and the chance to perform more group pieces. Number 2, it would allow the school to keep going. Restricting to only 6 students really isn't enough to provide the variety of classes that they are planning. Number 3, I don't see the difference of the impact from 6 to 16. Either way, there will be classes taking place and just more people on the floor at one time. I don't see any negative to this. Number 4, it allows for much more of a team spirit amongst the students. So finally, please give serious consideration to allowing both the time extension and the number of students. I understand you may not want to do this for everyone, but in this circumstance, it would be a huge benefit to all of us in the neighborhood and the local community. I have attended 2 wards, congregations from this neighborhood, and have never heard anything but good when it comes to the school. Everyone is very excited about the opportunity it affords.
Thank you. So that'll be our last public comment then. We'll go ahead and close public hearing.
One quick thing. Wanted to just say that once again, people in the Ivory Homes, Broadview Shores development knew that we were there. And they built there knowing that in advance. So just wanted to
Thank
make
you.
that clear.
Okay, that being said, public hearing's closed. Any comments from the commission, discussion?
Yeah, I have some comments. I don't think it's feasible at all to apply this citywide. I don't even think it's feasible for this lot, because if I move next door, it would just be I don't know, it's just going to change, right? Neighborhoods are always changing. Neighbors are always changing. I mean, we could have the support of 100% of Provo for this school right now, and then tomorrow another family will move in and oppose it. So I just think it's way too dynamic. I think the idea of extending the hours is kind of contradictory to the whole premise, because if we're saying that businesses stay open until 9 p.m., then we're saying that this is a business, therefore it should be in a commercial zone. That's just where I'm at. I think if there's 500 customers or students, as was 500 plus, right? Yeah, as was cited. That's probably more customers than Allen's had all month, you know? So, I mean, that'd be a great spot if you want to make a school out of that. It's in the right area. And then the liability for the church, like we said, I mean, we can all assume the church would never grant that kind of permission. Right. Right. I just think the location's irrelevant. I don't think we can apply it citywide. And the neighborhood support is just going to change tomorrow or next year or next month, you know. So that's where I'm at. I oppose it.
Anybody else?
I wish there was a mechanism by which you could run out in the hall and change this to a conditional request where it's just your house. Even so, then it might not work. I appreciate how careful and cautious and thoughtful you've been in preparing this very, very well, very thought out, amazing. But for everything that we've heard, I cannot vote for this because it's citywide. There is just no way this is feasible, whether it's the number 16 or 7, whether the time is 9 p.m. or 6 p.m. extended. It's just not going to happen because of what Ms. Ellsworth has said. It's too dynamic. Everything changes. There are cul-de-sacs. There are people who live in areas that this wouldn't work at all. For as much as it works in your area and that you've made it to work, it's fantastic. But that's one out of, who knows how many other places this would work. So this is impossible for me to vote to recommend an approval. This has got to be a conditional application. And even then, there's a lot more discussion that needs to happen. So.
Confused. May I speak?
No, we'll finish our discussion here.
As I read the ordinance this afternoon, I was absolutely astonished that such an activity would be in code. I had no idea that this was permitted by code without changing it and without increasing the hours or the number of students or customers or whatever. To me, a residential zone is a residential zone where people reside, and it's not a business zone or a commercial zone. If anything, I would go along with Mr. Evans and take the opportunity and amend 1441.060 and reduce make this more restrictive than what it is. And I cannot vote to expand it.
Thank you.
I cannot vote in favor of this proposal.
Thank you. Let me just add a couple of things to the comments that have already been mentioned, all of which I agree with. And I don't just want to echo other comments, but for me, fundamentally, it comes down to what's the primary use of the property. And I think this would be the same regardless of what we were looking at, but particularly given the calendar that we have for this, I think it really helps to illustrate that the primary use of the property would not be residential. And I think, the most fundamental thing maybe that we do as a city in terms of regulating land use involves zoning, and in some ways, sometimes having certain uses separated from others. And I think that people that move into residential neighborhoods should move into that with some assurance that there's going to be a certain character to it. And having businesses with more than 6 patrons at a time operating in those neighborhoods, I think really undermines kind of the the fundamental goals that we work with or work towards with land use regulations. So, yeah, this is impossible for me to support. That being said, is there any desire from the commission to hear anything more from the applicants on this? If not, then entertain a motion.
I move that we, deny the proposed ordinance text amendment.
Recommend.
Because it's going to the council.
I recommend that we deny, is that right? The proposed ordinance text amendment. Yeah, do we need anything after that? Okay.
We don't. And let's just start a second on that.
I'll second.
Thank you. We have a motion and a second. By way of discussion, Commissioner Ellsworth, would you feel comfortable maybe articulating some of the reasons for why you are recommending that motion?
I recommend that we deny the proposed ordinance text amendment because it has the potential to create significant negative impacts to not only the applicant's neighborhood, but citywide. And I concur with staff's recommendation.
Excellent. So we'll take that extra language. Second still stands, let's say.
Still stands.
Okay, super. Any discussion otherwise then? Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Super. Is there anything else we need to discuss as a commission tonight then? Staff? We have a motion. Do we have a second?
Second.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
It's 5-0.